I'm surprised that this story has not been picked up more by Indian media because it's anti-immigration and it's in the UK. And I would think that this is something that India would pay closer attention to. So here's what's happening. Belfast, which is in Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK, is experiencing some of the most violent and, quite frankly, terrifying anti-immigration protests that we've seen in recent times. What's happening is that masked armed men are going from home to home in Belfast, ringing the bell, evicting residents based on their skin color from minority communities, and burning their homes down. We understand from a recent report of the BBC that's just come out that there is now a list of about 100 addresses that's doing the rounds on social media of homes that should be attacked. The police have now said that anyone passing on this list is also going to be considered, a criminal, because this is completely unacceptable. But this is the kind of fear right now that immigrants are currently experiencing in Belfast. And I'm going to tell you what has happened and why a country like India should perhaps pay closer attention. Before we go forward, a quick reminder, please sign up for our membership. You'll get a bulletin every day, a news bulletin in which we fact check and we list out all of the news that's important from around the world in that news bulletin. Also, once a month, you'll get access to our accountability meeting where editorially we'll answer any question that you have about how we do our work and why we pick the stories that we do. Okay, so this is what has happened in Belfast. A 40-year-old local Irishman, so a white man, was stabbed repeatedly by a Sudanese refugee. Now, the victim, Stephen Ogilvy, is in hospital in serious condition. He suffered serious injuries to his eyes, his back, and his face. The police have arrested 30-year-old Hadi Aludid, who is a Sudanese refugee who has now been, or he was refused bail and he's now in custody. Now, he apparently came into the country in 2023 from Sudan to Paris, Paris to Dublin, Dublin to Belfast, where he applied for, refugee status, and that's an important part. He has asylum in the country. Now, it's interesting to know, when this particular case happened, the very bloody and worrying visual of it went viral on social media. And as soon as it did, immigration became the scapegoat for all crises in the neighborhood. Much of the Western world, as we have seen, immigration has become a symbol for a lot of the frustrations. The fact that housing has become unaffordable, public services are strained, living costs continue to rise, the economy is unequal, and that inequality is widening, and people feel less secure about their future. All of those problems are being pinned on immigrants. And the reality of those problems could be multifold, could be complex. It's globalization, it's AI, it's financial crisis, political failures, pandemic, climate change, lots of things could be at play here, but all of those things are too complicated to explain. But on social media, immigration is a very simple sort of target to point at for people to hate. And it offers a really easy story. So your wages are under pressure because of immigrants, or your housing is becoming expensive because of immigrants, or your hospital is overcrowded because of immigrants. And whether or not evidence actually supports that explanation becomes emotionally satisfying, and the hate starts to build up. So when immigration becomes the symbol of everything that is wrong, there will obviously be these strong men who come in to take advantage of it. In the US, we saw Donald Trump, who ran his campaigns about the fact that they need to secure their borders. Brexit was about taking back control. Here, right now, in the UK, there are people who are taking advantage. There's one far-right activist called Tommy Robinson. That's not even his real name. His real name is Stephen Lennon. And he's the one who amplified the story. Last year in London, he led a campaign or a protest in which 100,000 people showed up to say, we don't want immigrants, send them back home. He has now amplified this story in this video and told people to come out into the street and protest. Elon Musk, with his 200 million followers on Twitter, actually backed him up. And Elon Musk said, and I quote, "Only by protesting repeatedly and loudly will there be any change." Of course, these people are now also being held sort of morally responsible for what has played out in Belfast over the last couple of days. So a local incident occurs, the video goes viral, and the anger spreads, and then people like this take advantage of that anger. So what happened in Belfast? 200 people first gathered in the city center. They set garbage bins on fire, then they set a bus on fire, then they attacked the police, then they set police vehicles on fire. And by Wednesday night, the cops were using water cannons to disperse them, and the violence then spread through the rest of the city. Homes belonging to ethnic minorities were being attacked. Multiple properties were set on fire. Northern Ireland's First Minister Michelle O'Neill said there is no excuse or justification for these attacks. People are being turned out of their homes based on the color of their skin. This is nothing less than disgusting cowardice. One pastor, Jack McKee, who was helping the people who were affected, he actually said people are getting put out of their homes because they are black. There's another politician who said what you're seeing is a race-based program. And this is why it is terrifying, because it's not about your resident status. It's not about whether or not you were born in that country, if you're first generation, second generation, third generation. They're simply deciding based on the color of skin. So this is a white supremacist rally. There's no other way to describe it. And it's focused, at this particular point, it's focused on people who are black, or who are, African, or who are of African origin. But when something this violent starts up, it can very easily spread to other immigration groups as well. And we know that India is the largest contributor of immigrants to the world right now, and there is enough hate about India. And so this is why I believe this story is important to us as well. Let's take a look at what the data says, at least about the UK. As of March 2026, there were 2,379 asylum seekers in Northern Ireland alone. Belfast had the largest number, one asylum seeker for every 200 residents. So there are no asylum seeker hotels in Belfast. Most of them live in ordinary housing, which is why the anger is sort of spread to everybody. Across the UK, migrants make up about 16% of the population. That's 10 million people. The largest foreign-bound communities are Indian, Polish, Pakistani, and Romanian. Meanwhile, the net migration to the UK has fallen sharply. Official figures show net migration has almost halved, which means no one is leaving. This is important because public perception often moves in the opposite direction. So Belfast is not alone, because all of the UK has seen anti-migration protests. But last year, Spain saw groups of vigilantes patrolling the streets looking for migrants. Poland, self-styled citizen patrols were gathered across the German border to stop asylum seekers from coming in. In Netherlands, they saw similar movements. In Australia and New Zealand, just in the last couple of weeks, we're seeing anti-migration protests as well. Across Europe, anti-migration activism is increasingly moving from online spaces into the real world. The methods might differ, the slogans might differ, but the message is the same, that immigration is becoming a focal point of public anger over economic insecurities, strained public services, growing sense of governments losing control. Belfast is not a local story, and that is the reason why it's part of a much larger global political trend that we need to pay closer attention to. Why? Like I said, India is the world's largest source of international migrants. The Indian diaspora is now more than 35 million people across the world. In UK, India is the largest foreign-born community that lives in the UK right now. At the same time, attacks against Indians overseas has increased as well. Government data shows a rise in violent attacks against Indians and students and professionals abroad in recent years. So if this anti-immigration sentiment rises in countries like Britain, it's not really a British story anymore. It affects millions of Indians living overseas and studying overseas. And which is why I believe we should be paying closer attention to this, because when violence, and we've seen when the mob is out looking for a way to make itself feel better, it's not going to check your visa status. It's just going to go after visible signs. And at this point, the Indian diaspora community being successful, rising to the top of most of their jobs, are really visible. And a lot of times, especially in the UK, when people go to a doctor, the doctor tends to be Indian, the nurses tend to be Indian, the bosses in offices tend to be Indian. Now we're seeing a lot of politicians who are Indian as well. So this is a very visible group, visible for their success, visible for the fact that they're doing well, and hence can become a target for taking away jobs, for squeezing people out of their own sort of comfort. And that is something we need to pay closer attention to. There have to be stronger voices within the UK government that makes it very clear that the immigrants are not the problem. There has to be better law and order enforcement. There has to be better allocation of resources, whatever they need to do to make sure that this sort of violence doesn't happen. And fundamentally, let's take a look at it. It's quite rich though. when people in the UK, or specifically British people, turn around and say we don't want immigrants coming here, when they themselves have walked into more than half the world for 200 years, not at anybody's invitation, overstayed all welcomes, really robbed the entire world of resources repeatedly, actually subjected most of the world to brutal colonialism, to now turn around and say they don't want anybody entering their country is actually so deeply hypocritical that, in my opinion, they should not even be allowed an immigration policy. There should be some consequence for 200 years of colonialism, which they seem to completely have forgotten about. And now they're pretending like any sort of resource that they have in England right now that they have earned rightfully and fairly, which they have not. They should be required to share those resources with the countries that they looted from. But that's a much larger argument. If we just focus on what is happening today, my submission is simply this. The government in the UK, specifically in Northern Ireland, needs to get the job done. It needs to crush this violence and make sure that it doesn't come up again. It needs to take those who are encouraging the violence on social media to task, and it needs to make the people who are in the UK right now feel safe. Because every student, every Indian immigrant who is there, who is working hard and paying their taxes, deserves the safety of the government of the day. Leave me a comment in the comment section of what you believe when you see visuals and read stories about anti-immigration from across the world. There is, of course, a separate backlash about the Indian tourist, and that deserves a video of its own, and about about our civic sense, or the lack of our civic sense when we go overseas. But here we're talking about immigration and not necessarily about tourism. But I must point out, when there is violence, the people actually indulging in the violence might also mistake a tourist for an immigrant because they're judging based simply on skin color. How does that make you feel as an Indian who lives in India or overseas? Leave me a comment in the comment section.